Chamai and Waka, good afternoon, everyone. My name is Malia Villegas, and I am Aluktik Shukpiak with family from the islands of Kodiak and Afognak in Alaska and Oahu and Lanai in Hawaii. It's truly an honor to be here with you today. I want to acknowledge our generous hosts who have given us such a warm welcome and hospitality, Ms. Fawn Sharp, the Affiliated Tribes of Northwest Indians, and the Confederated Tribes, the Grand Ron, for the really wonderful canoe and horse welcome, even on a rainy morning. So thank you folks so much. I also want to acknowledge the founding director of the Policy Research Center, Dr. Sarah Hicks. I'm not sure if she's still in the room, but she served for 7 years, and I know that I've got some very big shoes to fill, but to have someone like her as a colleague and as a mentor is going to make this job just that much more inspiring to move forward. And also Ms. Jackie Johnson and the board for their vision in creating the Policy Research Center. This is truly a dream position, and it's an honor. The board and the staff at NCAI also were generous in waiting for me to complete my commitment in Australia. So I know that I'm ready to do some hard work, and I'm excited to be here. I just want to share briefly with you a little bit about some of the conversations that we've begun to have at the PRC over the 3 weeks that I've been there. I'm brand new to the position. This is my first annual as well, and so it's been wonderful to hear some of the conversations that have been happening here as well. The mission of the Policy Research Center is to provide tribal leaders with the best available knowledge to make strategically proactive policy decisions in a framework of Native wisdom that positively impact the future of Native peoples. And I think the pieces of that mission that definitely sing to me are that our commitment is to tribal leaders first and foremost. It's around policy decisions, acknowledging Native wisdom first and foremost, and having a sense of impact in the work that we do. Policy research being a bit different from policy and research, and that it sits at the nexus between those two so that we get to an applied space, but also one that is meaningful. And I think to that end, we've got 3 goals that we've begun to talk about at the Policy Research Center. One is to make policy research a context that is ethical. In that line, we've got a couple of projects that I just want to share with you in terms of an update that we're working towards, and definitely generate some of your conversation and insights as we build out these projects. The first one is Research That Benefits Native People, a guide for tribal leaders. And this is a research curriculum that Sarah and the team at the PRC have started, and we're trying to develop out to provide tribal leaders a way to meaningful engage research that's happening in their communities, as well as evaluation work. So we have this curriculum, it's 5 modules, but it's really developed to provide a way to help tribal leaders make sure that the work that is done in their region is done in an ethical and appropriate way, given cultural protocols and values. The second project is the Native American Research Centers for Health, or NARCH grant that we've got, which looks at community-based participatory research. You may have heard this term, CBPR, being used. And I was just at a conference where they were talking about the idea that if you hear this term being used in your communities, you can be assured that the work is being done in an ethical way. I think that's the case in some instances, but it may not be the case for all. So at the Policy Research Center, we want to look at CBPR, community-based participatory research, and find out what is really working well for tribal communities and tribal leaders in that, making sure that it is ethical work. And the third project is our genetics resource guide that we are still developing, but we know that tribal leaders are beginning to engage in questions and research, and having researchers come to them around genetics research. And we want to make sure that it's done in an appropriate and well thought out way. So policy research that is ethical, that is one of the big goals that we're talking about. The second is developing policy research that is meaningful, that has an impact, that pushes forward the work around community development and wellness. One of the most recent examples, we just got a grant around diabetes translation research, where we are working with the best minds who are developing cutting-edge diabetes research and trying to figure out how to get that work out to tribal leaders, out to indigenous communities in a way that is accessible and that can improve the health of your people and of all of our people in that. And then the second around research that is meaningful is some of the work that we've done with the Census Organization, the Census Department, and demographic research to make sure that the data that is collected on our people is actually going back into communities so that we can use that data in a way that is useful. In addition to trying to develop policy research that's ethical and meaningful, we really are committed to supporting Native researchers. We want to commit to leadership development. We know that we have wonderful young people and researchers out there, and we want to do what we can to get the support and information out to also help connect them in the work that they're doing. We are working with the Robert Wood Johnson Foundation around a range of fellowships, and have other organizations that we work with in terms of fellowship and youth development, leadership development opportunities. But we definitely are committed to supporting Native researchers in this domain. In terms of the mechanisms, then, I'm hoping that you're hearing that we do have a commitment at the Policy Research Center to data. We want to make sure that data is being collected in the right way, but also being returned back so that it's useful in tribal leader decision-making, which, again, is a big part of our mission. In addition to that data piece, we also are thinking a lot about networks and how we can work at the Policy Research Center, given that we do have a national scope, to figure out how we can support networking to happen across policy, across research, and to get those resources out to support the work that's being done in local and regional communities in that. The areas of work, then, that we're focusing around include indicators. We want to think differently about, for example, how do we measure success? What does success look like for our youth, for our communities, and how do we then report that back out to those who are collecting data to say these are the kinds of data indicators that we need to develop in this space? Health is another example. What does health and wellness mean for our communities, and how can we ensure that the data and the policy and research that's developed around that is reflective and informs community decision-making at that level? In addition to the indicators work, I think that we're committed to doing more around mapping, trying to figure out who's doing what, where, connecting those networks, like I said, but also figuring out who is collecting data, what is the quality of that data, and how can we get greater access to it. So there's indicators work, there's mapping work. But I think the final one is around celebrating the success. We really want to advance a strength-based approach to the data and policy research that we do. We want to identify and highlight the work that's being done in local communities, to bring that onto a national scope, to share that across. And to give you one example, some of the work that I was honored to be a part of at the Alaska Native Policy Center was around trying to transform the achievement gap conversation. We hear this in just about every education meeting that we go into about how our kids are not keeping pace with their white or their often East Asian peers. We wanted to transform that and really begin to look at developing more Native-to-Native comparisons. How are Native children, for example, in Southwest Alaska doing compared to Native children in Southeast? Given that there may be more similar historical, linguistic, cultural backgrounds, what can we learn about what's working well in one area that we can then leverage across, with the idea that we have strength in our communities that just needs to be shared out on a broader scale? So we are very committed to not only leadership development, but to celebrating what's working well and to sharing that as we do in our way through the Policy Research Center. In closing, I just want to acknowledge one of our elders who we lost this year. I know many of us have lost many people this year, but in our region, Angayukaka Oscar Coagley was a mentor, a teacher, a professor, one of our first Alaska Native professors. And he reminded us that as Arctic peoples, we have responsibilities to first and foremost know who we are and where we come from, because we have a particular way of communicating and caring for the earth in our region. But we also have to acknowledge that, for example, people in Brazil have their own way of communicating and connecting with the earth there. So we need them to be who they are in the way that they are. And this is part of a vision around both border patrolling, affirming who we are, protecting who we are, at the same time that we border cross. So I think that's a big part of what we're talking about, and I want to echo the calls for unity, but also acknowledging the distinctiveness that we need each other to be the diverse, unique people that we are in our regions, and to link arms across, to develop work and to celebrate the success and the beauty that is Indigenous America. So I want to thank you for your time and for the encouragement. I'm so excited to be here, I can't tell you. And just look forward to standing with you in this journey. So, Koyana.